Welcome to Inside Sports Talk with your host, Johanna-Rosalye. I am joined today by my co-host, Edward Cole. Today, we will be joined by our special guest, the Philadelphia 76ers beat writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Keith Pompey. Today, we will go ahead and be bringing you a special of NBA draft and the happenings with what has transpired over the last several hours, and diving in and talking trades and some NBA basketball for you. Ed Cole, my co-host, how are you tonight?
Good evening, Joe. I'm excited. Get to talk NBA basketball.
Yes, so much has happened and still to happen. So much to talk about tonight. Keith, great to have you on as always. An honor. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on again.
Of course, anytime. We have the NBA, the draft, that happened. We had round 1, round 2, and just to do a little recap of what transpired in that first part of that draft. We have LaMelo Ball was taken pick 3 by the Hornets. We have Anthony Edwards was the number 1 pick by the Timberwolves. We had quite a few picks coming from overseas, from Australia, from Argentina, Nigeria, Serbia, all over the world. We had that occur. Even some picks that are being traded or that even were already traded as we speak now to other teams. We have picks being made for other teams because they traded their pick. This has been a very interesting NBA draft this year. I think it's been one of the most kind of like shuffles that at least I have remember seeing happening over these last recent years. And then you also have some really great matchups as far as players go, which we will get a little bit into that. I just don't know how to sum up this draft. This is very, very intriguing, and boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say about that. I want to go ahead and dive in a little bit with a trade that happened, and it all started with the Suns. We have Paul, and it sent 3 players to Oklahoma City, and now we have Ricky Rubio, who's now ended up with the Timberwolves and is going to be joined by the number 23 pick by the Knicks, Leandro Bolmaro from Argentina. So that's going to be a good matchup, a good duo there. Leandro has played in EuroLeague, ACB. He has 98 career games already. He already has, that under his belt to get him going and to playing into the NBA. I want to get your thoughts on that, Keith.
First of all, I keep thinking about him leaving Argentina and going to Minnesota, and I keep feeling sorry for him because it's like a completely different climate. You know what I mean? I feel bad for him. But, you look at it, nowadays, these European guys are completely different. Like you said, you going over there and playing overseas is the equivalent of playing high-level college basketball, and sometimes you're playing with grown men most of the time. So it's a little bit, the talent level you can argue is a little bit better for them. So back in the day, you were always concerned, but nowadays you're looking at these guys and they're going to be NBA ready. I think the biggest adjustment for them is how can they deal with being in the States away from their families, oftentimes alone. So the main thing is, what do you do off the court? But then I also realized that a lot of these guys are smarter than us. And what I mean by that is they can adapt to different places. A lot of them, they know as in elementary school, they're not only taking English, they're taking other different languages. So when they come over nowadays, these guys are well versed. And they're very good basketball players. So not to be so long-winded, I'm not concerned at him at all. The only thing that concerns me for him is, like I said, dealing with that 30 below zero weather. That's the only thing that concerns me.
What about you, Ed?
I just want to see how now the Minnesota Timberwolves are so guard heavy because they've got Anthony Edwards there. They've got Bolmaro. Now they've got Ricky Rubio, as you mentioned, Joe. They've got D'Angelo Russell there. So they've got to figure out how to get all these pieces together because they've got some really strong pieces to go in the backcourt, Keith, and they've got to mix them in with Cat, Karl Anthony Towns. So the talent is there. Let's see. What do you think about Anthony Edwards as the number one pick? It was a good pick. I like Anthony Edwards. The kid's strong. He was very strong at Georgia, and I think he's going to translate that game really well to the NBA with Minnesota.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, when you look at Anthony Edwards, to me, he was always the best player. Now, maybe if Wiseman would have played more games, I could say to myself, like, okay, maybe. But the thing is, going to Minnesota, you look at it, Ball's a point guard or a combo guard. They got some other ball dominant players there. Where you look at Anthony Edwards, and he's more like a slasher. He can play off the ball. I think he's also Mr. Excitement, of everyone else. Now, not to hate on anybody, I don't think this was a deep draft comparable to years in the past. But when you look at Anthony Edwards, you have to say that he was the best player. Now, here's the thing about Anthony Edwards. So he was a great basketball talent. If Anthony Edwards would have went to a blue bloods type of school, like a Kentucky, an Arizona, or somewhere like that, where they get a lot of national attention, then I think more people would have been talking about him. The thing is, he was doing that stuff at the University of Georgia. He wasn't doing it at Georgia Tech. He was doing it at the University of Georgia. So I feel like some people are like, oh, well, how good is he? But when you see him play, you realize how good the guy is.
There was so much talk about Lonzo being the number one pick potentially. Where did you see it change, Keith, where the Minnesota Timberwolves were like, okay, we like Anthony Edwards instead of Lonzo Ball?
You know what? I think it was always Anthony Edwards. I do. Like from the day when I think the problem is, I think that when you look at Lonzo Ball, again, he's a point guard. Maybe you could play him off the ball, whatever you. But when you look at a guy like D'Angelo Russell, right? He's a very ball dominant guy. And so if you got the first overall pick, you want to build. I mean, again, you got to go with the best guy. But if they're close, you don't want two dudes butting heads. You know what I mean? Like, well, whose team is this? So I felt like that had a lot to do with it. And when you look at the pieces, Anthony Edwards can fit in better because you're going to have Alonzo with the ball in his hands. Edwards going to play off the ball. And then let's face it, this is Cat's team, and when you look at the ball guy, yes, he's a point guard, but he's also one of those scoring point guards too. So it's like, I felt like Edwards was just a better fit. And I also think, from an upside standpoint, he probably had the biggest. Now we can't fool ourselves and say, well, Minnesota wasn't thinking about shopping the pick, because they were. If they got a really good offer, they were going to slide down and get it, because that tells you that, again, Ball was the best guy, but they felt like if they can get a veteran player or get some more picks, they were going to slide down.
Keith, I'm sorry. I meant to say LaMelo Ball. I totally messed it up. I led you down the wrong path. LaMelo instead of Lonzo. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, hey, that's my fault too. I mean, his Pop shouldn't have had all those L's.
Yeah.
Right. I want to ask this too, Keith, with LaMelo Ball playing in Australia. We see how different it is playing basketball in a different country, playing overseas, playing in Europe. Australia, and that's where a lot of these younger players are going to get that experience, and it's and being prepared for an NBA draft such as this, putting them in a better position, I should say. Do you think with LaMelo Ball that was an advantage to him going to Australia and playing and being able to get to the pick that he ended up being for the draft this year versus going to a college and playing college ball in the U.S.?
Okay, I don't think the talent level over there is that good. The only reason why I'm saying that is because a couple of those teams came over here and played the Sixers, and it was horrible. Like, it was just bad, right? But what I will say, from a standpoint of life experiences, you're going away. You're basically, you go to practice, you go home, you have the rest of the day to yourself. How do you manage your money? I think that from that standpoint, it helps out. But I also believe, like, if he would have went to, like, let's just say, I'm not even going to say China, but if he would have went to Spain, or if he would have went to Turkey or somewhere where the basketball is extremely competitive, I would have said it would have helped out. But when you go over to like Australia, from the basketball standpoint, I don't think that the competition is strong. Not a knock against him. I don't think that the competition is strong. But at the same time, I think from just being out and being on yourself, it was a bonus.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into the draft before we go into some more picks and all the trades that have happened. And I want to get the take for both of you, Ed and Keith. How did this pandemic, for those that did play in NCAA and played college ball, the tournament, how we, March Madness and all of that, how did all those two aspects, being in the year that it's been for 2020 and going into the draft, how did that shape the draft this year in your perspective?
In regards to evaluating people and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I think, see, here's just the thing. Like, when you talk to college scouts, they all say, hey, if you didn't do your work during the season, then you're not doing any work, right? They always say that. But then now you're talking to people, and the same people were saying that, saying, wow, oh man, we didn't get to go to Chicago. Oh, we couldn't bring people into the practice facility. So I think it was harder. I mean, it was actually harder for them because, typically, yes, when you make an investment in a player, we're talking millions of dollars. And if you're especially a top pick, a lot of times it's bigger than just what they can do on the court. And what I mean by that is, like, you may get a guy who's a bona fide super basketball player, like all-star, right? But if he's immature, if he has some other issues going on that you detect from a one-on-one conversation or interview, then all of a sudden he may be one of those guys who, yes, he got through his first contract, but he was on like 4 different teams and then he was out of the league. So I think from that standpoint, it really hindered, like, set teams back a little bit. Like, okay, I was talking to one executive, right? Not executive, he's a scout. And it was a player that got drafted who was injured. And he said to me, he says, man, we really like him, but I don't know. He only played X amount of games. And he says, what can I learn from him being in the conference that he was in, that he was by far the best player? He said, so what can I learn? He said, he's supposed to dominate. So they passed on the kid because they were unsure, because they didn't get to see him play more games. They didn't get to see him at the combine. It was a lot of other different things. They didn't get to interview him in person, so they just passed on him. So it's a big difference to me.
Yeah, I agree, Keith. It's so different because the pandemic, you can't have like the one-on-one interactions. You can't fly these kids in and have all these workouts. You've got to do like Zoom meetings, like you said, and you've got to go on tape from the previous season. And of course, players are going to change. They're going to be different players than what they were the season before. So now you have to think, okay, well, I wonder how different this kid is. I wonder how different he is, because they can give you any kind of air on a Zoom call and be a totally different person when you meet them in person after you actually draft them. And then you're like, oh my goodness, this kid is not who we thought he was going to be. So yeah, it's very tough because the one-on-one interaction, like us, we're doing this Zoom call together. It'd be great if we could all be together and do this, but this is the situation that we were placed in because of this pandemic. We can't have that one-on-one interaction because we're all social distancing and we're trying to keep all of our families safe. We're trying to keep each other safe. And these are the situations that we're put in. And this is the situations that these general managers and owners and head coaches have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell a little bit of that did occur, and seeing that some of these teams, maybe not all of them, but some of them played it a little bit more on the safer side. That can be going with a player that's, okay, this is what I know I'm going to be able to get both, on the field and, on the court and off the court. And instead of having to take a risk like you would typically in